everyone, this is an updated tutorial for using Spreadsheet Web for the OVSJG Performance Measurement Initiative. My name is Paige and I'm going to walk you through some of the updates and changes to Spreadsheet Web. So each of you should have your organization's unique username and password. So we're going to start by logging in. When you log into the front page of Spreadsheet Web, just like it's been in years past, you'll see all of the different applications that your organization should be reporting on for fiscal year 2020. So for my organization, you'll see the 5 different applications that I need to submit for each quarter. In order to access each quarter's application, you'll go to the application that you're looking to fill, and on the right, you'll see this purple icon where it says View Data. Click on that icon, and you'll see that my application for fiscal year 20, quarter 1, has been uploaded. A couple of things you may notice: there are fewer actions available here. So no longer will you accidentally copy the application multiple times. There will only be one copy of each application that you'll be able to edit. So in order to edit, you'll click on the Edit button. And you'll see that the interface has changed a little bit. We tried to make it so that it was easier to read and easier to complete. And there are a few additional features that the new application has compared to the previous version of the application. So first things first, you'll want to make sure that you'll include the email address of the person who's completing the PMIs. This will be important because later, when you submit your application, you'll get an automatic email sent to that email address that CCs your OVSJG grant manager, letting you know that the submission has been received. You'll note that the grant manager has already been included on each of the applications for FY20 quarter 1, so for your grant manager. So you don't need to go and seek that out. You'll only need to insert the email address of the person who is completing the application. This is also important because if there are any questions or concerns that come up when I'm reviewing the data, I'll want to know who exactly I should be contacting. Sometimes the organization contact person that we have from OVSJG isn't necessarily the person who completed the PMIs, so we'll want to know who the person is that completed them in case any questions arise. The thing we're going to look at is one of the new features that's available in this version of Spreadsheet Web. In previous versions, if the number of demographic identities reported was different than the number of new primary victims that were reported, I would have to manually go back and email each grantee to have them update the data. With the new version of Spreadsheet Web, the database actually won't let you save the data unless the numbers that you've inserted are correct. So I will give you an example. So we are going to assume that this quarter we served 15 new victims, new primary victims of crime, and we'll say we serve 0 continuing victims of crime. So for each of these demographic factors, we have to list 15 factors for each of the demographic categories because we need to have one of these categories for each of the new primary victims that were served. So we are going to put in some numbers. And we're going to see this bottom thing where it says total denders reported. We'll take a look in just a second to see how we'll make that calculate and what that calculation means for our ability to save. So we're going to do the same for the rest of the factors. All right, so once we've filled out all of the data, you'll scroll to the bottom and you'll see 3 buttons. The first you'll see is check data, you'll see next, and then you'll see the save button. So the first thing we're going to want to do when we believe that we've completed all of the data is we're going to check our data. So if you scroll back up, you'll see we stated that we served 15 new primary victims of crime this quarter, and we need to report one of each of these categories for each new victim of crime. So the total genders reported should match the number of new primary victims that we state that we served this quarter. And as you can see, when I hit the calculate button, or when I hit the check data button, it calculated that I stated that I served 15 total genders reported, 15 total races and ethnicities reported, and 15 total ages reported. Now let's see what happens if one of the numbers that doesn't add up to 15. So I'm going to change this here to 4, and I'm going to hit my check data button again. And what you'll see is a couple things. You'll see that this number changed, so it says that I only reported 14 different age categories, and that does not match this 15 number of new primary victims. You'll also see that the Save button has made it so that I can't click on it. Once you click the Check Data button, if the numbers do not add up, you won't be able to save the data on that page. So in order to save the data, I'm going to go back and change my number. I'm going to hit the Check Data button one more time, and then I'm going to hit the Save button. So once I do that, the record has been saved, so all of this data is saved into the database. So I could exit out of this application. I can refresh my screen, and I can go right back in to edit it again. And all the information that I input into the database, it has been saved. So for the victim data, there are 3 pages, and there are 2 different ways that you can navigate through the multi-page data applications. The first is when you scroll to the bottom, you can hit the next button, which will take you to the next page. You can also navigate just by using these tabs at the top, like an Excel document. So I can click on the primary victim tab, it will take me to the tab. I can click on the secondary victim tab, and then I can also click on the all victim data tab. So for the purposes of this example, I'm going to say that I only serve primary victims, and I'm going to skip the secondary victim data page, and I'm going to move on to the all victim data page. Here on the total victim data page, I'm going to show you a couple of updates that will hopefully help with some of the back and forth that we've had historically, trying to make sure that all of the data was correct. So all of the questions are exactly the same as they've been in previous reporting quarters. So let's take a look at the location of residence for each new crime victim served. So one thing that is important to remember about question number 23 is that it's asking for the quadrant of residence for both new crime victims that are primary victims as well as secondary victims. So here you'll see another one of these areas that shows you a calculation. And this is the total number of new clients, which is the sum of the new primary and the new secondary clients that have been reported. So for the purposes of this example, I said that our organization did not serve secondary victims. But what would happen if I go back? And I'm just going to quickly say that we served 5 victims that were new secondary victims of crime this quarter. So I'm going to check the data. One thing you'll see is that it won't allow me to save it, but the calculations will still go through. So I'm going to go back to my all victim data page, and you'll see that this number has updated. So this is the number of quadrants of residence that you will need to report so that the numbers will allow you to save. I'm going to go back and delete the 5 secondary victims because I don't want that to show up. And I'll go back to the all victim data page. So for the purposes of this report, we served 15 new victims of crime this quarter. So we need to have 15 quadrants of residence reported. So we are going to put in those numbers there. So we're going to scroll down. So number 24 is the type of service that was provided to each crime victim this quarter. So this includes new, continuing, primary, and secondary victims. So the idea is if that you served a victim of crime, that they were provided with at least one service. So this box here shows you the total number of clients that were served. This is going to add up the total number of new primary continuing primary, new secondary, and continuing secondary. So for the purposes of this, I'm going to just add a couple of clients. And if I go back to my all victim data page, you'll see that it looks like I've served 27 clients this quarter. That means that there need to be at least 27 services that my agency has provided, because we're assuming that each client has received at least one service during the quarter if you're reporting that you served them. So we're going to go in and we're going to put some services in. And we'll come back to this in just a second. The final thing is the category of crime for each unique new victim served. So this includes new primary and new secondary victims. You'll see a note down here that we've already calculated that sum when we looked at the quadrants of residence. So if you scroll up to the quadrants of residence, this number here, there should be at least this many crime types that are listed, because this is the sum of the new primary victims and the new secondary victims. So when we scroll down here, we're going to put in some numbers. And there may be more crime victimizations listed than the number of new primary and new secondary victims served, because some of the victims that we serve have multiple crime types. The same goes for the services that were provided. It's likely that you've provided more services than the number of clients that you served, because one client may themselves have accessed 10 different services. So once we've completed all of our numbers, we're going to scroll down, and again, we're going to hit the check data button. So you'll see this area hasn't highlighted because the numbers on the entire sheet are not correct. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to delete those extra victims that we stated that we served. So what you'll see here is you'll see the total sum of new clients that we served was 15. And the total quadrants of residents that were reported are 15. So those two numbers do indeed match. We scroll down here and we see that the total number of clients that we state we served is 15. And the total number of services that we provided is 26. So this number is greater than or equal to this 15 here. So that should be good to go. And then finally, we scroll down and we say that we've served, there have been 27 different types of victimizations with the clients that we've served. And again, this number is greater than the total number of new victims. So the sum of the new primary and the sum of the new secondary victims that we state that we've served. So if we go down, we're going to hit our check data button again. And you'll see that that save button is appearing. So we can go ahead and save this data. And the same thing will happen if these numbers are not correct on this page as happens in previous pages. So I'm going to make it so that I only have 10 different crime types listed here. So I'm going to scroll down, I'm going to hit my check data button. And again, this save button is going to black out because that means there's something wrong with the data that I've input. And if I look down here, I'll see that there are only 10 crime types that have been reported, but I know that I've served 15 new primary and secondary victims. So I need to make sure that I account for at least one victimization type for each crime victim that's been served. I'm going to recheck my data and then I'm able to save that data. Now the final step that we discussed briefly on the first page is going to come into play here with the submit report to OVSJG. So once you've completed the report, you've saved all of the information, you're going to want to notify your OVSJG grant manager, and you may want to keep a copy of the record that you've submitted the report for your organization's purposes. So the two email addresses that we put in up here are the email address of the person who's completing the PMIs, which is me, and my OVSJG grant manager. So back on the All Victim Data page, I've completed my entire report and I've saved everything. So now I'm ready to submit the report to OVS. Once I hit that Submit Report button, a few minutes later, I check my email and I will have an email. And it will state that the victim data report was submitted. It'll say my organization has submitted the victim data report PMI for the quarter. So all of this information will automatically change depending on what's in your PMI report. So each different report will change. This will change here. So if you submitted the training and outreach report, it will state that Paige's organization submitted the training and outreach report. Each quarter it will change, and then the name of the organization. All of this information is pulled directly from the application that is submitted through Spreadsheet Web. So once I'm done with this report, I can exit out and I can go back to my main application page. And I'm going to want to complete the report for each of the different categories that my organization is funded to complete. The one additional change that has happened this fiscal year is for those of you that are funded for outreach, education, and training. So again, all of the questions are exactly the same as they've been in previous reporting quarters. But the one difference is for those organizations that are funded for training, OVSJG has an interest in learning about the trainings that you're providing to other allied professional agencies versus those trainings that you're providing to community members. And so they've asked that you divide the training events and the participants into these two separate categories. So on the left, you'll see all of the questions are for those organizations that provide trainings to other professional organizations during the quarter. And on the right are all the training events that organizations provided to community members during the quarter. The questions are exactly the same, and each organization provides trainings to different types. So you may have responses in both columns. You may only be responding in the professional training column or the community education column. This really depends on what your organization was funded to do. But again, all of the questions are exactly the same. We've just asked you to divide up the trainings between professional training events and community education events. So that's the brief tutorial. A couple of other features for organizations that are utilizing Spreadsheet Web for the first time. You can also take a look at the history for your organization filling out each application. So if you have multiple people that are filling out applications and you want to keep track of when changes were made and what changes were made, if you hit the little calendar button where it says history in the actions column on the each application page, you can actually see the different changes that were made. You can view the different changes. So it will tell you which categories were updated and how they were updated. And this can help in case you have multiple people working on any given application and you want to keep track of who's making what changes. And if you have any questions about Spreadsheet Web or any of the updates that we've made, you can feel free to reach out to me and I'll be available as needed. Thank you.